Welcome to the Political Power Hour with your host, former congressional candidate, retired federal agent, and three-time author, Michael Velarde, highlighting today's political hot topics with the most interesting political candidates in the 2022 election. The most hard-hitting political commentary on the air today. Enjoy the show.
Welcome to the Political Power Hour. This is our last show tonight. We have a great show for you. I'm with two of my favorite candidates, Dan Franzese. Dan, welcome to the show. And Keith Feit, welcome to the show, Keith. And we really think this is going to be a monumental election. Everybody's calling for a big red wave. And if there's two people that could pull it out in highly Democratic districts, it's going to be Dan and Keith. So I'm so honored to have them both here on the show the night before Election Day. Guys, thank you for being here.
Mike, thanks for having me on your show. Always a pleasure.
Always a pleasure, too. Keith, welcome. You're welcome. You're welcome. All right, so Dan, I'm going to start with you, with your race. You are running against Lois Frankel. Lois, never before in the 10 years she's been in office, went out there and spent money for commercials. In my race, when I ran in 2020, she didn't buy one sign, do one commercial, and she cruised to an easy victory over Laura Loomer, winning by over 20% of the vote. Mm-hmm. Well, whatever you've done, I don't know what you've done, but you've scared the pants off her. She's running crazy ads all over the place, and she seems to be losing it a little. I mean, why don't you tell us a little about your experience about running against her and how that's going?
Sure. So, Mike, she's definitely running scared. She sees what we see, which is that this is a race that we can win this year, and I'm confident we will win because we've run a big campaign. We've run the biggest and best campaign anyone has ever run against her. TV, radio, digital, internet, email, text message, door-to-door, paper, snail mail, and so on. And it's forced her to do the same thing, which she's never done. But that tells us she sees the race the same way we do. On top of that, her ads about me have been completely dishonest, and there's a simple reason for that. She cannot win on the truth. Right. The truth is that she and her pals Pelosi and Biden have screwed up the economy, screwed up the border, made our country less safe. On top of that, the foreign policy has been a disaster. Our country is the laughingstock of the rest of the world. So who would want to run on a record like that? And that's why she keeps pivoting to things that are non-issues here. And on top of that, lies about my record.
Well, I got to tell you, I mean, she came, all the only ads I've seen with her is all about abortion. And you came out with an ad that just basically said it's settled law, it's over, let's talk about inflation, let's talk about crime, let's talk about the real issues.
That's right, Mike. I mean, when Roe v. Wade was repealed here in Florida, not a single thing changed. And that's a misconception that the Democrats have been pushing, which is that, oh no, things have changed in Florida. They have not one bit. And that's because it was already voted on this state and it's settled law. And that's a phrase I've been encouraging other conservatives to use to make the point that nothing changed with that. And then she, on top of that, has said I support a national abortion ban, which is 100% false. I've never advocated for that. I am a pro-life person, but I'm also a pro-constitution and a states' rights person. I believe that should be handled by the state. So I would vote against any national abortion law, whether it's pro or con. So
now you have had the opportunity to meet Lois. Tell us about those interactions.
Sure. Just further on the previous point, we always try to steer the conversation to the things that people want to hear about. When I talk to voters, I'm not sure I've run into a single one who said that they want to talk about abortion and only abortion. The economy is big on everyone's mind, as well as the border. So I've had a couple of chances now to see her, and it's been quite surprising. So the first one was just a candidate forum in the town of Palm Beach where multiple candidates were able to get up and talk for about 3 minutes, give their vision for the country. Me, I've been at this for a while, so I got up and could very quickly talk for 3 minutes, no problem, about my vision for our country. It shocked me. She came up with written remarks. For someone who's been in public life for 40 years, you would think she can, without a handler, say what's on her mind. But then a week later, we were at a sort of a debate where we each had 2 minutes to give an opening statement. Same thing. And now I wasn't watching her during that debate, but what I heard from people, because they had a podium between me, it went from me, then we had the moderator, and then
Right,
her.
they had to separate it,
But again, when we were asked questions, I could extemporaneously answer all the topics because I've been thinking about these for a year and a half. What
Right.
I was told, every time a topic came up, she would go through a folder, pull out notes on it, read from that. And that's pretty shocking behavior from someone, who claims to have a good grasp of all the issues and has been in public life for almost 40 years, a
Yeah.
true career politician.
She really doesn't know her job, does she?
Doesn't seem like it, and and some of the remarks she was making were kind of out of place. This event was at a Chamber of Commerce, and she was going on and on about how the rich need to pay their fair share of taxes and other things like that. So it was just canned remarks that she probably gives everywhere, every place, but that was not exactly the audience that wanted to hear that.
Well, no, I'm proud of you. I think you've run a great race, and I think you're going to win it. I think it's about time that we put a Republican from Palm Beach in Congress, and I think you're going to be the guy that does it.
Mike, we're feeling good about this. What we've seen in the run-up over the last couple of weeks is a much higher than normal turnout from Republicans. So the big question is does that mean just Republicans have started to become early voters? I think it's probably a mixture of that. I think it's a little bit of that, but I also think we're going to see higher than normal turnout of Republicans tomorrow.
Yeah.
If we get that strong turnout, we're going to see a lot of very happy surprises tomorrow. A lot of races that were not supported or not considered viable, we're going to see either close or win them. If we get that good turnout, I'm confident we're going to win my race tomorrow.
I'm confident we are too, and I think Keith is going to win also because, Keith, you're taking on Joe Casello there, and it's becoming obvious that even Charlie Crist likes your supporters. I mean, that's amazing to me. I mean,
Mike, was it yesterday now? I think yesterday.
Yesterday, yeah.
I had the not so pleasurable experience of meeting up with Joe Casello at the Souls to the Polls event
Yes.
over at the Hester Center.
Yeah.
And, big Democratic
Yeah.
supporters there. And Joe came in. He was only there for about 10 minutes, didn't speak to a voter. The only person he tried to approach was Charlie Crist,
Right.
and then he came over and he approached me.
Yes.
And he was complaining about my tweets
Right.
because I had been tweeting out that his people had been, tampering with my signs and, let's debate. Let's forget about this nonsense games and let's have a debate so the voters can hear from both of us and they can make their determination. Well, so we got, discussed it again yesterday, and I again challenged him to a debate, and he told me that he wasn't going to debate me because I'm too far right.
Right.
I'm too far right, and my policies are radical. So, I started to ask him, what's radical? Is it the fact that I don't believe critical race theory belongs in our schools, or I don't believe kindergartners should be indoctrinated into this alternative gender theory nonsense? What is it? And Joe, let the people decide. Let them hear both of us. I'm okay. If they hear my stanzas and they don't like it, then vote for the other guy. But he knows he has an advantage in that the Republican Party of Florida, has not been supporting our Palm Beach candidates. So we have less resources. We haven't had as easy of methods of reaching the voters. So they haven't been hearing about all his bad votes and the contrast between my policies and his. So he obviously wants to hide. He's doing the hide and Biden. I don't know if he has a basement. There's not a lot of those in Florida, but he's hiding
Right.
somewhere.
Right.
And
Under
he
a couch,
refuses
maybe.
to debate.
Right.
Under a couch, maybe.
It might be, but just like Dan talked about with Lois Frankel, I think Joe Casello and his people are scared.
Yep.
They haven't been challenged like this in the past, and they really don't know what to do because, again, not a record to vote on, different than Lois, but again, he voted against parental rights in education. He voted against banning CRT. He voted against banning sanctuary cities, against protecting police. And he supported the lockdowns and the mask and vaccine mandates. So, when you look at his record, he has nothing to defend. So he tries to call me far right because I am supporting policies that a majority of
Right.
the voters support, including for parental rights, 60% of Democrats support
Right.
it. So he's out of touch, and he's wrong for Florida. and he has an abysmal voting record, and that's why I'm voting against him. And I have no idea what the turnout's going to be. I don't like to make any predictions, but I'm very happy with the campaign we ran. We got our ads on the radio, on TV, digital ads, YouTube ads, and we've been pounding the pavement. We've gone to thousands of homes, spoke to tens of thousands of voters, and so it's been a long year. But whatever happens on Tuesday, I don't think we could have done any more, on our own than we did. So I'm very happy.
Well, I just got to make two comments. One, I saw that little confrontation yesterday. It was amazing to me that this guy could not come up with one thing that he's done to give people a reason to vote for him. He absolutely refused to even debate you or engage you. He just wrote you off as well, you're a right-wing nut job, so I can't even talk to you. But he couldn't tell anybody what he's done. That to me is amazing. These people get in office, they've been in office for years, and they can't run on an accomplishment. Lois is much the same way. She can't debate. She can't tell you what she's done for people. She spent a lot of money, we know that. And she obviously buys, she has people obviously contributing to her campaign, whatever she's doing to throw money their way to help, her constituents, But that's it.
Well, she's been there 10 years, Mike.
Right.
A member of Congress with 10 years tenure can be a very powerful person. They oftentimes are committee chairman or at least subcommittee chairman. She's none of that. So they know what they have. The Democrats definitely know the quality of the person they have there, but the reason they support her is that she is just a loyal Democrat soldier. Yes. And I'm going to repeat a story I told here, I think, on one of your shows, because I brought it up in that candidate forum because it set her off in a big way. I was talking to a voter one day. He says, Dan, my member of Congress is Nancy Pelosi. Right. And I corrected him and said, no, sir, it's Lois Frankel. And he said, Dan, you're not getting it. Of course, I know it's Lois Frankel, but the reality is she just does whatever Nancy Pelosi tells her to do. Right. So in reality, that's who represents me in Congress. And if you're voting for Lois Frankel, you're really voting for Nancy Pelosi to represent you. So I said that in my closing statements. Yeah, kind of a tough remark, I'll admit it, but it's the truth. Right, that and the fact that she's really, even though she has 10 years of tenure, she's had no clout that's done anything for the county or anything period. No one can name any legislatures that she's sponsored. So then the moderator says, thank you, everybody, we're done, have a good day. Well, she stands up and starts screaming at me, Mr. Franzese, you broke the rules here, you're not allowed to criticize me. I mean, just it was absolutely hilarious. So, and then stormed out. She pronounced my name correctly, so for that I'm grateful. But otherwise, she just went on. She just lost it.
She's not thick-skinned.
Not at all.
Yeah.
Well, it's because she's gone 10 years without a real real challenger.
Yeah.
She's never had to spend money on a campaign, and we've. I tell everybody who's helped my campaign, I said, listen, we're in this to win it. Let's just be clear.
Absolutely.
But even if we don't, the fact that we're putting up such a good fight is forcing them to put resources at this that they otherwise wouldn't have to. So that does help us. Obviously, we want to win this, but at a minimum, we accomplish that.
Well, you're looking back over all the other challenges she had. I think by and far, you are the strongest challenger, and you came at the right time.
That's right.
Okay, you're at a time when the Democrats are like out of favor because they've given us the highest inflation since Jimmy Carter, the highest interest rates, the highest gas prices, the worst. I mean, the living costs are through the roof, and Joe Biden, hard to believe, but they put out a tweet that they had to rescind, saying, "I've given you the highest increase in Social Security." And then on Twitter they put, well, that's because Social Security increases are tied to inflation. And because we had the highest inflation in 40 years, that's why you're getting the highest increase. And it's still not enough to offset the inflation number. And so they had to back out that tweet to take credit for it. Because really what they're taking credit for is the worst economy we've seen in the last 40 years. And so you're running at the right time. You're the right guy because you certainly hit on the issues correctly. Your commercials, I think, are the best.
Well, thank you.
And anybody who has a brain, well, I mean, has a little bit of information, but I mean, they're going to see that she hasn't done anything. She's long in the tooth, been there a long time. And, 39% of the people are showing up to vote against her no matter what. Now you start pulling those independents, because the last election, Laura Loomer was not a great candidate. I mean, people look her up, her name, and go, "Oh my God, this woman's a nightmare," and they wouldn't vote for her. Even Republicans weren't supporting her because of her reputation. Now you come in, you don't have that, and you are a good candidate. You haven't been, you haven't handcuffed yourself to the Twitter building or done anything like that, and you got a solid background, and you're a smart guy. You got a great business background. You've been married to your wife for what, almost
36 years.
36 years. You got kids. You've done everything right, and you really put fear into her, and she's panicking. That's why you have these outbursts at these meetings, because normally, why would she? She was confident. She wouldn't be running out of the room, storming out, "You're not allowed to criticize me." Who would do that?
Right.
Okay.
She's had no challenge for years and years.
Right.
She's viewed it as a safe seat. I think to some extent we caught her snoozing, truthfully, because it wasn't until, say, 3 weeks ago that she was really running any kind of campaign that I
Right.
could see. And interestingly, in much the same way that she's been, as a member of Congress, just towing the party line, doing what they say, when I talk to people in other parts of the country, they say, "Wait a second, what is she saying in her commercials?" It's almost word for word what they're saying in commercials all over the country.
course.
So she's just running off-the-shelf messages about me
Exactly.
without even checking out if it's truthful, which it's not.
Exactly.
And when I've pointed that out to her multiple times and put it in writing, she just shrugs it off, says, "Yeah, whatever, politics." And she, by the way, she didn't say politics, but you could see that's the reaction
Right,
she has.
exactly. I mean, you and Keith, you're taking total advantage of Joe Casella. This man has no ability to debate you, and you keep challenging him to a debate. I mean, what are you doing? You're taking advantage of him. You're taking advantage of somebody who can't stand up and defend themselves with their records.
Well, unfortunately, Mike, he claims to be a representative of the people.
Yeah.
And obviously he's not. And there's two reasons that I know he's not. Number one is because in the thousands and thousands of people that I've spoken to on the campaign trail, only one person has known who Joe Casella was.
Wow.
And this is a guy who has represented the area, Boynton Beach, for 2 terms, 4 years. And only one person has known who he is. And that guy only said, "I recognize the name." So I didn't really know who he is. He recognized the name. Maybe he was confusing with Abbott and Costello. I don't know. But he knew the name. And the second thing is, you look at his financials. And I think the last time I saw, there were 4 individuals. Only 4 individuals who contributed to his campaign. Every other contribution was from a PAC, a union, a corporation. Okay, he had no individual support. And when Sun Sentinel pressed him, saying in the interview, he's like, "This guy's a first-time candidate, and he's got as much money raised as you."
Right.
He went on, about his PAC. He's got $100,000 in his PAC, and the area's Democratic, so he's confident, and nothing about what he's done for the people, what good qualities he brings that makes him a better candidate.
Right.
It was all about the fact that he had more money from unions, more money from woke corporations, and that there were more Democrat voters in this area. So he's counting on people's party loyalties, overcoming their desires to do what's best for them, their families, their children's futures. And it's a pathetic statement. And, when I started out this race, I came in and I said, I have nothing personal against this guy. He just has a very bad voting record. I don't agree with it, and I don't think somebody with that voting record should represent the people. But now it's gotten worse. I've seen that he's beyond an empty suit. He really is like no-show Joe. Because when there has to be a vote, he's just going to vote against Governor DeSantis. It doesn't matter what it is. Like I said, he voted against raising penalties on people who attack police officers during riots. Why would you possibly vote against that? Especially, he's been endorsed by the PBA, the law enforcement unions. He's also been endorsed by the Boca Chamber of Commerce, even though he has an F rating from the Florida Chamber of Commerce. So I've seen this now political game. It's corrupt as can be. They want to protect each other, because that's where their pockets are lined, and they don't want an outsider who actually wants to put the people first.
Well, you said he's an empty suit, but when I saw him yesterday, I think he's a blue jeans kind of guy because he does not make a good presentation. You know, I mean, you got to dress the part.
Well,
You do have to dress the part. If you want an office, you want, right? I mean, I've seen some, you know, I've interviewed a lot of different candidates. And some of the third-party candidates, you know, running for senator, running for governor, they don't understand you got to dress the part. You have to look, right? Joe looks like he sweeps the floors at the elementary school. I mean, I'm just saying it's the presentation. I don't know. Would you agree with me or?
Well, you know, I'm even beyond his presentation. Dan was talking earlier about Lois having her cheat sheets. Well, I went to a forum, first time ever at a forum. It was a Cobra forum. And we go up there and Joe introduced himself. I said, hey, Joe, how you doing? He said, hey, Keith. You know, it was all nice. And we sat down next to each other, and he comes out and he pulls out this little thing he has handwritten notes, you know, and I'm thinking to myself, you're a two-term representative. You're going to be getting basic questions that all of us, and there were a bunch of first-time candidates up on the stage, and nobody had notes but Joe. And if you need notes to actually answer questions from voters, I'm not too sure that you've been doing your job as a representative for 2 terms.
Right. And, you know, when we come back, because we got to cut to a commercial break, we're going to be talking about these midterm elections, the momentum, where these races are going to go. Because, you know, we were at that Souls to the Polls, and I didn't feel the momentum. I didn't feel that Democratic enthusiasm that a couple of years ago I think I would have felt. So right now we got to cut to the commercial break. When we come back, we'll be talking about the midterm elections. We'll be back in a minute.
And I approve this message.
Lois Frankel's massive tax and reckless spending policies are killing us with inflation and higher costs. That's why Frankel lies and always changes the subject. Don't fall for her smokescreen. The truth? In Florida, the right to abortion is settled law. The truth? Lois Frankel and Nancy Pelosi are destroying our economy. Vote Dan Franzese for Congress. Dan's a successful businessman who will get our economy and our country back on track.
Our prosperity and our children's futures are all at stake. Join me in our fight for your future and fight to make sure that your voice is always heard. Vote to finally put the people first. Vote for Keith Feit because Joe's gotta go.
Paid by Keith Feit, Republican for Florida State House.
Inflation and high costs caused by Lois Frankel's reckless policies. Republican Dan Franzese is clearly your best choice for Congress. Dan is a successful businessman who understands finance and economics. He's not a politician. Dan grew up blue collar and knows how tough inflation is on working families. Dan Franzese will go to Washington and fight the liberals who are killing us with inflation. Dan Franzese for Congress.
I'm Dan Franzese, and I approve this message.
You've been watching the Political Power Hour with Mike Velarde. For more information, email us at mikevelarde@gmail.com. That's Velarde with 1 L. And now, back to the show.
Welcome back to the show. I'm here with Dan and Keith, and we're going to talk about tomorrow's elections. Tomorrow is Election Day 2022. Guys, Dan, we'll start with you. What do you feel? And then we'll go to you, Keith.
I feel like I'm going to win this race, Mike.
I think you are too.
There's just so much support I'm getting out there. It's going to be a combination of tremendous Republican turnout, but I've also run into many Democrats who say, hey, hold on, what we're getting from this government is not what I signed on for. You know, I thought I was going to get moderate Joe and people were going to cool things down in our country, but what we've seen for the last 2 years, he and Pelosi and Frankel have been throwing gasoline on our country. Mm-hmm. So I know a lot of Democrats are going to support me, overwhelmingly the independents.
Yes.
You add that all up, and that's a formula for winning the race. That's just the buzz I get when I go out talking to people. And Mike, I've knocked on about 5,000 doors now in the district during this campaign, and I speak to people of all parties, and I find there's just tremendous dissatisfaction with the direction of the country. Mm-hmm. And that's why I keep telling everyone, if you're not happy with the direction of our country, send a message by voting for me, because I'm the guy that's going to get it back on track.
I think you're going to get about 54% of the vote. That's what I'm.
All right,
that's what I'm,
good,
that's,
Mike.
That's my number.
I hope you're right,
see
Mike.
If I'm right. Now,
I'll take 50.1.
Right,
but,
exactly.
But,
no, but I think
but
it's
54
gonna
would be great.
I think it's going to be a slam dunk. Now, Keith, we were at the Souls to the Polls event yesterday. I felt it was kind of low energy for a Democratic event. My beautiful wife-to-be had the opportunity to get right next to Charlie Crist because there wasn't a whole lot of people wanting to take pictures with him. I couldn't believe it. I mean, maybe just because she's so good looking, but there was nobody, there was no crowds, there was no enthusiasm. It was going to a Joe Biden event. Maybe I'm wrong here. Go ahead.
No, I think you're absolutely right. It wasn't high energy, even when the supposed, rah-rah speakers got up there. There was very little applause. It really wasn't. It wasn't a. I don't even know how to say it. It wasn't a moment that was going to boost anybody's enthusiasm for voting. Right. Now, I went to a Ron DeSantis rally today, and we were in the front. And I have to tell you, I had to literally use all my strength to block people from running over my mom.
Right.
Because they were, literally, I had a guy climbing on my back to try to get to the governor.
Right.
Like, I feared for my mom's life.
Right, yes.
And there's no way that happened. Like, I don't know how your wife-to-be would never have been able to get up to Governor DeSantis like she did to Charlie Crist. And that just shows you the absolute lack of enthusiasm that they have for Charlie Crist. And obviously, hopefully that runs down, down the ballot. I agree with Dan. What I've seen on the campaign trail is a lot of unhappy people. A lot of unhappy parents, especially with what's going on in our schools. And we've come across a bunch of Democrats that have said they've had enough and that they were going to support us. So, I don't know what the numbers are going to be. I don't know if I can get to the 54% that Dan's going to get to. But, I'm feeling good about the race. Like I said, whatever happens, we put in everything we had. But from the feedback we've been getting on the campaign trail, it's definitely looking as though the Democrats are definitely out of favor.
Well, let's look at it this way. Joe Biden's been going to New York. He's going all over the country. His events don't come close to the Trump rallies. Now, Trump has been out of office for years, but he went to Pennsylvania. Place was packed. He was in Miami. Place was packed. Joe Biden's a sitting president. He can't fill a room. What does that tell you about enthusiasm going into this election?
Well, it's just not there, Mike. And that's why I think we're going to win this one, because the Republicans, they've been waiting 2 years for this day, and they're very unhappy with what's been going on. But I also said a lot of Democrats are unhappy, and they want to send a message. The interesting thing is they're always very quiet about it because they're always afraid of getting chastised or shunned for saying it. But I feel that we're going to get a very big support from the Democrats in this race.
Well, the turnout in Georgia is at a record level. In the Georgia, for the race for Senate. And here, I think the numbers are pretty good, too. Correct me if I'm wrong, right?
Very, especially
strong.
Stronger than usual turnout from Republicans so far in early voting and vote by mail.
Right. So, now, my only concern is I'm not a big fan of mail-in ballots because you can't verify who really sent them in. Mm-hmm. When somebody goes in person, especially here in Florida, you have to produce an identification. You have to produce your driver's license. They know you're there. They have video of you coming in, going out. They know exactly how it plays out. So that kind of bothers me. Joe Biden made a comment about a week ago that bothered me. He says, we're not going to know for a couple of months who won.
Oh.
Now.
Won what? Like the governor's races or my race?
Won the Senate, won the Congress. Now that should never happen. But in some states like Pennsylvania now, they're taking a week. They should never take a week to have to count all the ballots. Now, here in Florida, we should know Wednesday night, right? We should know to the Wednesday we're going to know who won, who didn't win. And it should, now, I heard some, and I don't know if you guys heard this, but someone called me this morning, and it's kind of disturbing. This QAnon, I don't know if you heard of QAnon, that Q thing, right? I just think it's BS. But they're telling people not to vote. And the reason they're telling people not to vote, they're saying, well, if you vote in 2022, it nullifies 2020. In other words, you're admitting that Trump didn't win in 2020, some nonsense like that. Telling people actually stay home. Now, this is the Republicans, of course. So I think Q is all BS myself. That's
or
my
possibly
take on
infiltrated by
yeah, absolutely.
the wrong
It's
people.
totally a psyop or something. I mean, it's just not. It makes no sense to me. I mean, that's the only way I could see a red wave not happening here.
Well, I'll tell you, Mike, there's nothing the Democrats would like more than for us all to get frustrated and say, the elections are crooked, I'm just not going to bother voting anymore. So we cannot play into that. If someone's telling Republicans to stay home, shame on them. They're hurting.
Absolutely.
They're hurting us big time.
Absolutely. We got to get out the vote. And I feel the enthusiasm on the Republican side. Mm-hmm. It's hard to make a case for the Democratic Party at this point in time.
Well, they don't. They make no case. They always deflect and turn to issues that are non-issues, like the A issue, the abortion issue they keep bringing up, and Trump and other things. Well, I keep telling everybody, Trump's not on the ballot, by the way. Dan Franzese is, or Keith Feit is.
Right.
And you should be evaluating us based on what our policies are and our platforms are. And so they keep deflecting the things that have no relevance to this election because they know they can't win on their record. They can't win on their results because there are no results.
They can't.
Well, there are results. They're bad results.
But go ahead, Keith.
So just a story from the campaign trail. I had this guy who told me I should be ashamed of myself, that I was ignorant, and so I said, well, why am I ignorant, and what should I be ashamed of? And he says, you're a Republican.
Right.
You deny the election. You want to take over the country. You want to coup. And I said, I don't want any of that. And I said, where are you getting this information from? Well, you're a Republican.
Right.
And so as we go through it, and there's a long conversation going on, and he's rattling off all these talking points from the kooky mainstream media. And I said to him, I said, listen, I said, here's what I stand for. Why don't you tell me what's wrong with what I stand for, and tell me what you stand for? And he literally looks me in the eye and says, well, everything you stand for, but I can't vote for you because you're a Republican.
Yeah, it's unfortunate the way that people have gotten so tribal about this stuff, right?
I had the same thing happen to me.
And I've had so many times I've had people say, "Oh, well, you Republicans." I say, "Wait a minute, you don't know me.
Exactly.
And you don't know me."
Right.
And then they'll go, "Oh, Trump," and they walk away. I've had that one a good half dozen times. Oh,
exactly.
Trump, and they walk away. I said, "Trump is not on the ballot.
Right, exactly.
I am, and here's what I'm going for."
And I try to tell them, vote for the person, not the party.
Right.
I had the same thing happen. I went to a public library when I was running for office, running for Congress, and this lady comes in and she walks into and she asked me Republican. I said, I'm a Republican. I said, but wait a minute, let's go through the issues. And I, go through my Social Security issue, which is of course a big one. I'm making it tax-free for the elderly, getting rid of the double taxation, and having the separate trust account so everyone can have Social Security, and adding the death benefit to it, right? Well, yeah. What don't you agree with? I agree with everything. She goes, but I could only vote for you if you become a Democrat.
Yeah.
Now that's a problem.
It's terrible. Yeah, no.
That's a problem.
I'm one of those old-fashioned people who believes you should vote on the basis of issues.
Of course.
Which for me, pretty much 100% of the time means I am going to gravitate toward the Republican because that's who's going to be in favor of smaller government, lower taxes, supporting the military, and so on and so on.
Constitution.
But and the Constitution, exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
But you know what? If there was a Democrat doing it better, I would have to consider it.
Well, I gotta ask you guys a couple of questions about a couple of races, and let me know if that's okay. New York. You from New York. You lived in Manhattan. Lee Zeldin is making an issue out of crime. Mm-hmm. And basically, he's at least, some polls have him ahead now. Some polls have him just slightly behind. What do you think of that race?
So it's an interesting one because the governor said, "Why are you so concerned about crime?"
Right.
That's going to be one of those lines she wishes she never said because within the past couple of months, someone tried to kill him.
Right.
There was a shooting outside of his house. I'll tell you one of the reasons I'm watching that race. What I've been told from a couple of people who've been crunching the numbers is the voter makeup in all of New York State is actually pretty similar to the voter makeup in my district. and which has given me hope, because it looks like by
Absolutely,
emphasizing crime as a real problem in the state, that's gotten people's attention, and he may win it. In my particular district, we've been emphasizing economics overwhelmingly, and because that's thankfully crime is not a big issue here in our county yet. I hope it never becomes one. But economics is, because people are getting priced out. Senior.
Exactly.
Do you know, Mike? Did you know 1 million seniors last year fell below the poverty line? It's not because they did anything wrong. It's because of economics. And being Florida, we have a lot of seniors. So people here are very concerned about economics. I think for me, economics is going to be the thing that carries me over the top, the same way that the crime issue is going to be the thing that carries Lee Zeldin over the top in New York.
Yeah, and I got priced out myself. That's why I'm moving to Ocala, because
I'm going to miss you, Mike.
I'm going to miss being here. But that's what happened. That $600 a month rent increase.
Oh, wow.
Just a start. Keith, what do you think of those races?
New York? Well, like Dan said, Kathy Hochul showed every voter in New York State why she should be disqualified. The fact that you have people being pushed in front of subway trains, people being beaten at the subway, people, old men, elderly men being attacked in broad daylight. All these things going on, and she sits up there and says, I don't know why you're making such a big deal of this crime. And she tries to bring it up as though it's a Republican conspiracy. And that seems to be what they fall back on every time they don't like the reality of the situation. But really, anybody who's affected by living in these neighborhoods that are high crime neighborhoods have to seriously think about whether or not Kathy Hochul is qualified to be the governor. And obviously, by her policies, I think she's shown she hasn't. But that statement right there, in my opinion, disqualifies her. So there's no doubt that Lee Zeldin has the momentum. And, New York is very, very Democratic. But again, if Lee Zeldin's able to win New York, then I think it's more than a red wave.
Now, she brought in Bill Clinton, Hillary Clinton, Joe Biden. What do you think of that, bringing those people in a couple of days before the election? Helps her or hurts her?
I think it gets her attention for sure. It gets her on the news, but it's the same old, tired old Democratic Party that she's bringing out. How about bringing out some new ideas on how to fix your state? I mean, she's truly just playing her fiddle like Nero, if you will, right? Isn't that the guy?
Yes.
While all around her, the state's burning down from record crime. It's terrible what's happening there.
And she's not paying. She's one of the worst politicians I've seen. She's almost as bad as Joe Biden himself. What do you think, Keith?
I think Dan hit it on the head. And by bringing in these people, she's showing her desperation. She's showing that she doesn't have the ability to generate any enthusiasm for her voters. And she is an atrocious politician. She did the same thing as Charlie Crist, right? Where she said that, we don't want you. If you want to go, we don't want you people here.
That's right.
Right? Go to Florida.
Right.
Just like Charlie Crist said, if you support Ron DeSantis, we don't want your vote. And, these politicians, I don't get it, where you're telling voters you don't want their vote, you don't want their support. She's a gift to Lee Zeldin. I think any decent politician, as good of a candidate as he might be in this whole environment, even in New York, wouldn't really have that much of a chance. But she is giving Lee Zeldin more than a chance, where he has a very good possibility of winning that election and being like George Pataki was in '94.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah,
Exactly.
She truly is a gift, because New York's the biggest media market. There's plenty of media to just show just how bad she is. Locally here, we don't have a lot of local media, and that's one of the ways that Lois Franklin's been able to stay below the radar. I find more people learn about it, the more they say, wow, we need change there. So she's been able to stay below the radar. And so for instance, her record is as liberal as the Squad. In fact, she's arguably is the fifth member of the Squad, or arguably the godmother of the Squad. Yet people down here don't even know that. They say, "Oh, I thought Lois is just kind of reasonable." And so she acts like someone's reasonable member of Congress down here.
Right.
When she's in Washington, she votes like one of the biggest progressive left-wingers.
Right. I mean, so let's just shift to another governor's race before the next commercial break. Let's talk about Georgia. Kemp versus Stacey Abrams.
Oh, I think Kemp's running away with that one. I think people have just gotten the same old from Stacey Abrams, who, interestingly, after spending 4 years of saying that she got robbed in the last election, is suddenly saying, I never said that. I mean, they're nervous, some of these people. Just like all these people who advocated for school shutdowns, like the president of the teachers union saying, well, no, isn't she backpedaling that she never really advocated for closing down the schools? She was one of the biggest advocates of it. But that one, I think Kemp's going to run away with it. The Senate race, I think, is more of a toss-up in that state.
Yeah, it is. What do you think, Keith?
Well, Stacey Abrams has shown herself to flat out just be a racist. And you look at it, she's already set it up where she's going to be governor if the people can overcome Kemp's voter suppression tactics, right? She's already said that. So she's already set it up where she can claim that she hasn't lost again, just like she did, like Dan said, 4 years ago. And everything about her, voter suppression, keeping minorities from voting, it's all the old, race card, identity politics. That's all the Democrats have. Right? Class warfare, race warfare, now gender warfare. If they're not dividing people, they have no chance of winning.
Right.
And so that's what they do. That's their plan. And she's trying to do it, but it's just flat out not working because people are seeing, hey, things aren't good in the country, right? They've seen the job Kemp has done, and from everything I've seen, he's done a pretty good job there. And so I don't think anybody's going to fall for her nonsense this time. She's old news, and hopefully after she loses this time, she goes away.
Aren't they having record turnout in Georgia?
They're having record turnout,
yeah. So much for voter suppression, right?
Well, I'm sure it's record white turnout according to her, and the minority vote has been suppressed.
I think this is going to be the end of her political career.
I hope
think
so.
She's long in the tooth, and I think after she loses this race, it's over. All right, so we're going to be back. When we come back, we're going to be talking about Congress and the Senate and how those two houses are going to span out and we think what's going to happen in the Congress and the Senate races. All right, so we'll be back. I'm your host, Mike Velarde. See you in a few minutes.
I'm Dan Franzese, and I approve this message.
Lois Frankel's massive tax and reckless spending policies are killing us with inflation and higher costs. That's why Frankel lies and always changes the subject. Don't fall for her smokescreen. The truth? In Florida, the right to abortion is settled law. The truth? Lois Frankel and Nancy Pelosi are destroying our economy. Vote Dan Franzese for Congress. Dan's a successful businessman who will get our economy and our country back on track.
If your family is suffering from inflation and high costs caused by Lois Frankel's reckless policies, Republican Dan Franzese is clearly your best choice for Congress. Dan is a successful businessman who understands finance and economics. He's not a politician. Dan grew up blue collar and knows how tough inflation is on working families. Dan Franzese will go to Washington and fight the liberals who are killing us with inflation. Dan Franzese for Congress.
I'm Dan Franzese, and I approve this message.
Times are tough, and we can no longer afford representatives who blindly follow the failed policies of their national party. Our rights, our freedoms, our prosperity, and our children's futures are all at stake. Join me in our fight for your future and fight to make sure that your voice is always heard. Vote to finally put the people first. Vote for Keith Feit, because Joe's gotta go.
Paid by Keith Feit, Republican for Florida State House.
You've been watching the Political Power Hour with Mike Velarde. For more information, email us at mikevelarde@gmail.com. That's Velarde with one L. And now, back to the show.
Welcome back. Now we're going to be talking about the congressional and Senate races in the last 5 minutes that we have here on the show. Dan, we're going to start with you. What do you think the House is going to look like after tomorrow?
I think we're going to pick up a positive 10 to 20 majority, and that's going to be big. I think we're going to pick up, I think the Senate's going to be 52 to 54 Republicans, so, and this will be great news.
You mean 52 to 48?
52 to 48, exactly, or maybe even 54 Republicans. I think it's going to be very clear, and the good news about that is you never have to worry about, one stray senator not showing up for a vote or just having a difference of opinion. It's good to have a little bit of safety margin, and it's going to be a great thing because people say, well, what can you do if Biden is still the president? And the answer is, remember, all spending bills start in the House of Representatives.
Exactly right.
And we can start in the House, and especially if we win the Senate, we can start passing budgets that start bringing us back toward my long-term goal of getting us back to balanced budgets.
Absolutely, which is what
and
we
now, then Biden may veto them, and so be it, but at least we'll be setting the path that this is the way the country needs to start thinking about itself. Because right now we're spending ourselves into bankruptcy. We're about $1 trillion deficit or more per year. We have to borrow that money. We don't just print it in the basement. Who do we borrow it from? The biggest lenders are Japan and China. And we're making ourselves more and more beholden to them. We have to change that course of the ship.
No, we absolutely do. 1979, first time we had $1 trillion deficit, and now it's $1 trillion a year. It's ridiculous.
That's right.
Keith, what's your take on the Congress and the Senate after
Well,
tomorrow?
Dan, I've been seeing all these tweets from Joe Biden, just that how much he's lowering the deficit. So I don't. I think
well, it's another one of his many shams.
Well, yeah, because you take off all that COVID spending, and then all of a sudden he's lowering.
Zero for employment. Employment's up because of him too. Not
exactly
really.
The 10 million jobs that he's created.
These people are just shameless how they throw these facts around.
Absolutely no shame. They lie as it's lying is oxygen for them.
Yeah.
It's like it sustains their life. But as for your question, I'd say between 240 and 250 seats in the House for the Republicans, and I agree with Dan around 52 Senate seats. There's a lot of close seats, and who knows how they can go. It would be great if they can get up to 54, but the 52 is important because you always have your Mitt Romneys, your Susan Collins, your Lisa Murkowskis. So we got to make sure we have that cushion. So 53 would make me a little more comfortable.
Well, me too. That's what I was alluding to earlier when I say that we don't have to worry about someone having some sort of crisis of conscience or whatever they want to call it.
Exactly.
And not supporting.
It's a crisis of conservatism and a crisis of constitutionalism.
Yeah, that too.
Well, let's talk about some of these Senate races and how you think they're going to. Let's start with Georgia. Georgia, you got two flawed candidates to some degree. Mm-hmm. What's your take on who wins that and why?
Well, one of them much more highly flawed than the other.
Right.
And Herschel Walker is a first-time candidate, and I think has made a lot of the same first-time candidate mistakes. But I think he's just got a very good grounding in the Constitution and good conservative principles. I think he will pull it off and be a good senator.
All right. What do you think, Keith?
Well, I think, obviously the flaws aside, he is a first-time candidate. And I'm learning out, and I'm sure, Dan, you're learning out how hard it is to run a campaign all year long or 2 years, whatever it is. But Herschel Walker is on the right side of history right now. He's on the side of the values that the American people want. He's against what the American people don't want, with the inflation and the all this basically war on parents and war on workers and the race divisions and all that. So I think Herschel Walker has the advantage. I think the Georgia's people have gotten to know Raphael Warnock, and he would have lost the last time if if the votes weren't divided amongst Republican candidates. So I think Herschel has a slight advantage in Georgia.
All right, so let's talk about the Pennsylvania race, which is probably getting the most attention. Fetterman and Dr. Oz.
Fetterman, I think we've talked about this before. The guy should not be running. I mean, he should be at home and resting, because someone who's had a stroke like that needs rest. And I could tell you, being a candidate, especially in one that's getting national attention like that, it's a very 24-hour-a-day stressful thing. So he just truly, for his own personal well-being, forgetting whether he's a Democrat or Republican, should be at home resting. He just doesn't seem up to the job.
No,
I mean, do you want someone like that as one of the leaders of the country? I mean, I feel bad for the guy. So it's nothing personal.
Of course.
But if he were a Republican, I'd be the same thing. He just does not seem up to the job.
Right. He needs to stay at home, like you said, and wait until the next Senate election if he wants to run.
Well, listen, we got to wrap up the show tonight. I just want to say thank you for everybody for watching. Tomorrow's Election Day. I do believe we should see a red tsunami, and we should win both the Senate and the Congress, and God willing, that'll happen. But thank you for watching the Political Power Hour. I'm your host, Mike Velarde. Thank you, Dan. Thank you, Keith, for being here. Until next time.
Everyone get out and vote.
Thank you for watching the Political Power Hour with your host, Michael Velarde. If you would like to see a particular candidate on our show, please email us at michaelvelarde@gmail.com. That's one L in Velarde. We will see you next week.